All right, guys, it's Eric with Casual Car Talk again. Today, we're going to be doing the crossover pipe and the turbo inlet elbow right here. Both from Whoosh Motorsports. This is about 130 bucks for the wrinkle red. I think you get them for 110, 120 if they're not painted red. And then the turbo inlet elbow with the clamps and the hose piece, about 90 bucks. But I really like how the build quality is just amazing on these. So I have a matte performance intake right now. We're gonna be replacing this crossover pipe and then down to the inlet turbo elbow. Basically, you gotta take the cowl off, and how you do that is you take this these caps come off right here and these nuts, and it takes the wipers off. That's how you take the wipers off, and you kind of push on the wiper. I'll show you how later. And then there's a few bolts for the for these cowls. So I know there's a bunch of clips as well that you have to take out right here. So these clips come out, and I'll show you where all the bolts are. But basically, you take the whole cowl out, and it gives you a lot of room to move right down here to the turbo inlet elbow up to the crossover pipe. So I'll show you how that's all done. Okay, so step one, take off the engine cover. Step two, you take the little caps off the end. They pull right off. It's super easy. By the way, for reference, this is a 2018 Fiesta ST, and these are little 15 mil bolts right here. Once you break them loose, they come off really easy because they're covered and not all rusty. So we're gonna take those off, and then I've got a little metal tray I keep everything in, which is a good habit, is to keep everything easy to find right here. So then to take off the wipers, it's a little tricky, and try not to pinch your finger in there, but you essentially are just taking it off from here. Now I would mark where your wipers are. Mine are dirty enough where I can pretty easily see, so you can put a little tape down, but that's just to make sure they go back on, because I've heard people's wipers get out of sync and then their wipers don't work. So what I have found, and I'm not going to show you on camera, but if you push down right about here, and not super hard, like don't break them, but if you kind of wiggle back and forth, you'll kind of rock it up the threads. Hey, just like that. And then it comes right off. And make sure you know which one goes where, so you don't look stupid later. Okay. So next step is there's these little clips right here. So these are all going to come out, and you might want some pliers, but you can wiggle them and they'll come right off. Try to keep them, but they're basically clipping the top and bottom piece together. And then both sides have a little piece that's going to have to come out right here on the, I don't know, the trim right here. And this just pulls up. You can see the little tab right under there. Just pulls up and out, just like that. All right, so I got all the clips out. I just used a little panel removal tool and kind of dug them out, or a flathead. Don't use pliers because you'll just pinch them and make it worse. And then this actually just pops right out of here, and looks like it brought some trim with it. So we don't want to lose that when we put it back together. Back on. So I'll get that snap back together and clean that up a bit while I got it off. But yeah, so that's step one. Next step is taking this off, the bottom piece. Now you are gonna have to take the headlights off because there's screws on the end right under there. And we'll get to that in a sec. Okay, so for this piece, you actually don't pull that out like I did. You just pinch the top and push it down, and it will go right through. There we go. There we go, now it's out. So there's just a little tab right here that you can squeeze in and push down. A little bolt right there. So we've taken out that one, the two under the headlights, and that might be it. Yeah, your headlight is right here. And I just took my headlights out enough to pull them up. I don't want to disconnect them or anything, just because I've been doing it so much lately. But yeah, just pulling that out enough will give you enough access. It's just a little 10 mil in there, 10 mil right here, and same thing on the other side. And I think that's all, but we'll see as we go. All right, I got all 4 bolts out. These headlight bolts, just for reference, are little T30s, and they're pretty easy to get out. And then there's just one little Phillips right here, a little Phillips pop socket thing. They look like this. Good Lord. So you just take a screwdriver and slowly, carefully, or not even carefully, but just slowly unscrew that and then pop it up with something else under the bottom collar, and it'll pop right out. They're pretty easy, and those are right here. And then you've got your 2 headlight bolts, one here, and then when you're trying to get these out, you're going to want to pull up, kind of up and back to actually pop them out, and reverse of that, push them in and down when you want to put them back in. They can be a bit of a bear, I'm not going to lie. I don't like putting this side back in at all. But anyway, we got those 4 bolts out, so 1 on the bottom down there, 2, same thing on the other side, and now this should come right out. And there we go. And that is what it looks like behind your cowls. And that gives us a lot more access to this pipe. As you can see, we're gonna have way more room to get this off. So next thing we're gonna do is disconnect this line. We're gonna take out the intake, or move it out of the way and just disconnect it. And then we're gonna take these two bolts out and loosen up the hose clamp on the bottom of the crossover pipe. And that is what we'll need to get this out. And then this kind of unscrews the whole thing. This is like a bolt, more or less. It looks kind of different, but it's not that hard. We'll get there. But yeah, so we're gonna start by taking out the old crossover pipe and taking out the old turbo inlet. Okay, so next step, I decided to take my intake off, which my Matt Performance intake goes down to this little bolt right here. And that's where this little bracket is. Otherwise, you'll have to take out the stock air box. Plenty of videos on how to do that. So you unplug that, and then there's a little connector that goes on the bottom right here. And it's one of these red ones. So it doesn't squeeze. This tab goes in and out right here. So you slide that all the way to the back and then pull the whole plug right off. It's actually pretty easy. And then this hose came right off the side of the intake as well. Oh, try not to lose a hose clamp right there. So those are the connections. Then I managed to pull the intake right off. And then this is a 10 mil bolt right here. You don't have to turn it very much for this to loosen right up. So we're gonna take that off, and then I use a little 13 just to break this one loose. So we're gonna take those two off, and then we're gonna try to loosen the hose clamp on the bottom of the crossover pipe. Okay, so the hose clamp for the bottom of the charge pipe is right there, and it's a 7 mil. My cash can's actually kind of getting in the way, but I got this extendable ratchet here, and so I'm just slowly taking that out best I can. And it's coming. That should be it. And then don't forget to take this connector out. You just pinch it, just pinch the top and pull it out. It doesn't take a lot of force, so be nice to it. But all right, so if you do not have a catch can, this will be a lot easier. I just removed the mounting bracket bolt from mine, and it gave me a ton of rope to get into the bottom hose clamp there. So I finally got it loose. That's our culprit right there, a little 7 mil, but it's out. And I still got these grommets in, so that's good. Okay, the 3 bolts for the turbo inlet, so the piece we're replacing here, are little 8 millimeter bolts right here. There's 3 of them. They're kind of a pain to get to, but you can get in there with a medium extension here. So I use this, and I just stuck my hand down in there, and I was patient, and I was able to break all 3 loose. I don't think they're supposed to be that loose, but I was able to break all 3 loose just with my hand. I didn't even use a ratchet on there, which kind of surprised me, but you can get a ratchet in. Once you do get the inlet out, this is the kind of tricky part. You'll see there's a line on the back side here. So there's the 3 bolt holes, one by my thumb there, 2, and then the other one is on the bottom. And you can't get to them straight on. You don't need a swill or anything. And then there's a hose clamp right where my thumb is here. And so we're gonna work that down to where my thumb is, which is off the little nipple here, and then it'll pull right off of this, and you can get the turbo inlet out. So there's the 3 bolt holes. And there is a little gasket in here. The one we're replacing it with does not have one. I kind of shoved the turbo inlet after I got the 3 bolts out to where I wanted it so I could get access to the top. And then I pinched it, pulled it back, and I could actually get my hand back behind there. So you're gonna want a friend with skinny arms. That inlet size is. So it really is gonna free up quite a bit of airflow and hopefully sound a lot better. So first thing you're gonna wanna do when you put the new one in is reconnect that hose and get the clamp back on. So, like I said, this one does not have a gasket. So one thing you will notice is the supplied screws by Whoosh are a lot smaller than these ones. You can see substantially smaller, but not to worry, it's because of the thickness. I mean, you can see it's almost double the bolt needed to go through this plastic piece and give that the support it needs. So yeah, I'm not going to reuse this gasket. Obviously, there's nowhere to put it in the stock one, but I think a little RTD will do the trick, and should seal up pretty good. And then yeah, don't go crazy with these bolts. These were so loose, it almost made me nervous, and I know I don't want them to be that loose because that's metal on metal. So I can go a little bit harder, but don't strip those out, okay? That's going right onto your turbo and not worth stripping. Transferring the grommets over from the stock pipe, you can just take the plastic piece right out of the top and then work the grommet in there and then stick this back through the top instead of trying to wrestle them in there. All right, guys, so we were getting a little short on time, but we got everything installed, and I'll kind of walk you through how we did it because it's almost easier to talk through in retrospect. So for the turbo inlet elbow, we were trying to fiddle with those bolts to get them back in. I ended up not using any gasket maker. I read a lot on forums of people saying that you could just suck that in the turbo. It's not really under that much pressure, so it's kind of irrelevant. And even with that metal on metal, your odds of having metal or air sneaking through there are pretty small. And I just didn't see the need for it after doing my own research. So I didn't. I mean, absolutely, if you feel more comfortable doing that with a little RTV, go ahead. With the turbo right there, I didn't really feel like messing around with it. So I didn't. So to get those bolts in, what we ended up doing is I had my buddy hold the top for me of the turbo inlet onto where the bolt holes are. And I took off this wheel, and through the wheel well, I managed to get two extensions with a little wobble socket on the end, and I could actually fish those bolts in. And it was a little tricky, and you know, take some breaks and don't get pissed off because it's easy to get mad at, but you do have room through the wheel well, just like with messing with blow-off valves and stuff, which I've relocated my blow-off valve to right here, so it's a lot easier to mess with, but yours will be down right below that turbo inlet elbow. So then once you get that on, what we found was putting the pipe on after doing the turbo inlet was easier. And so what we did is we actually put the connector for the silicone connector for the crossover pipe to the elbow. We tightened it up on the crossover pipe first, so it was about halfway up, and that let us push it down on the turbo inlet elbow so that it didn't go too low. And then we tightened the bottom clamp for the turbo inlet elbow, which you can see right down there. You can see the head of it right there. Almost right where my finger is, right there. And so we tightened that up, and then we re-secured these bolts for the crossover pipe, which is just a 10 mil, and then I believe that's a 13 mil, just to tighten that. And I just snugged them both. You don't need to go ham. And then remember how I showed you with these little grommets, take the top out of them, and then pull the grommet out and put them onto the new pipe grommet first, and then push the little cap back in the top, and it's actually not hard, but it looks really good. And you can still see, I'll put the engine cover on in a minute, but then you reconnect this hose right here. On your intake, like I have a MAP Performance intake. The issue we ran into is I need a bigger elbow right here. It looks like it's not sealed off, but it actually is right here. And I have just enough pipe for the clamp on each side of this, which I'm not very pleased with, but that's nobody's fault. I mean, this is the connector. It came with my MAP Performance intake, which is with the assumption that it's the stock crossover pipe. So it's just really close, and I'm not very happy with it. So I'm gonna get a bigger one, maybe a Montoon or something. I'm gonna call MAP Performance today and see if they have any in stock, and I can just run over there. And then don't forget to put the connector back on right here and the plug underneath where these little wires are. And you just push that plug on, it'll lock into place, and then push the little red tab back in like I showed you with the removal. All in all, the turbo inlet elbow is a bit of a project. I would say doing the crossover pipe would be cake. I think anybody could do it in a garage with basic tools, but the turbo inlet, you're gonna need a friend. And if you want to get this stock hose back on, you need two people to push it onto here, and we just use some injector like cleaner lube stuff, that Lucas injector cleaner, and just lubed it up around there and just pushed it right on there. And definitely needed two people though. And what we did is we started from the bottom of the crossover pipe, pushed it up, and then used a flathead to kind of flare the top open really carefully without scraping or scratching the crossover pipe. But yeah, it sounds a lot better. I wish I would have done an inside test, but I don't think my camera or any of my mics would have picked it up very well, so it wouldn't have really showed you much. But I'm not capping that in place, but that's what it looks like. I mean, it's popping out of there, and I think I might do maybe a red hose right there would be kind of cool. We'll see what I can find. But yeah, it sounds a lot better. The blow-off valve seems to be not as chirpy as it was. It was chirping really hard up here before I did that crossover pipe, and now it seems to be much less present. And it definitely feels like when you're doing a pull, it's not more power. It seems like it falls on its face later though, so you keep the power longer is kind of the vibe I'm getting. And I have no evidence or tunes or data logs to back that up, but I'm very happy with the products itself. And I mean, Whoosh does an amazing job, and yeah, I'm just very impressed. And then with the cowl, just as a note, it's exactly the reverse of how we took it off, and it went in really easily if you're careful with it. And don't force anything, especially these headlights don't like to go back in. So don't force stuff, take your time. And thanks for watching, and please comment if you have any questions. I'll do my best to answer. And if I find this elbow, I'll throw it in the description later on. Also, it's October 16th and it's snowing outside in Minnesota, so that's why I put on my winter tires last night, in case you're wondering.